A simple woman was mocked for the way she held the scratched Remington 700 for asking where to load her magazine, for the quiet way she waited at lane 12 with her hands clasped lightly around the laminated card. Her ponytail was too plain, her jeans too worn, her stance too unsure. Someone laughed loud enough for the range to hear, calling her a tourist, and others followed with smirks and muttered bets that she wouldn't hit the paper at all. One man took a photo of her grip, zooming in for the caption, "When Mom brings a spatula to a sniper match." Another leaned close and offered to show her how to aim if she promised to bake him a pie afterward. Phones recorded her confusion as the assistant range master corrected her posture publicly, loudly, theatrically. She said nothing. She accepted the weathered rifle, adjusted her ear protection, and listened to the jeers float behind her like smoke. When her name was announced for the head-to-head elimination round, someone groaned and asked why the club was wasting ammunition, but then she lay down, steadied her breathing, and in less than 5 minutes fired 10 shots that never strayed from center. Her final bullet split her first, leaving a single ragged hole in the dead middle of the target. The line fell silent. Men who had mocked her lowered their phones. A judge stood frozen, eyes fixed on the screen. Then the range manager leaned in, narrowing his eyes at the silver ring on her scarred hand. It caught the sun in a flash, and a former instructor whispered her name with sudden recognition. The woman they'd called lost, clueless. And Soft had just broken the club's standing record, and not one of them had seen her coming. Megan Carter's world had become small by design. At 35, she had mastered the art of invisibility. Her days began before dawn in a faded kitchen just east of the Colorado River, where she packed lunch for her 16-year-old son, buttoned her Navy school polo, and smoothed flyaways into a plain braid. By 7, she was parked in her usual spot outside Oak Ridge Elementary School, sipping burnt coffee from a cracked thermos and preparing copies for the third-grade teachers. No one there knew about the silver ring on her finger, or why her knuckles bore small, permanent scars. To them, she was the reliable office assistant who fixed jammed printers and remembered everyone's birthday, the kind of woman who sent thank you notes in her own handwriting. She was kind, calm, quiet. She was also something else entirely. Her apartment overlooked the river, but the view came with thin walls and a second-hand AC unit that wheezed in the summer heat. The living room doubled as a study space for Ethan, whose textbooks and basketball shoes shared a low table with Megan's unopened mail. Their evenings followed a rhythm she found comfort in: homework, dinner, dishes, silence. Sometimes she'd sit on their narrow balcony with her feet up on the railing, watching the lights move across the water while Ethan fell asleep on the couch with earbuds still in. On the small side table sat a framed photo, worn at the corners, her in a dusty tan uniform, Ethan clinging to her leg, a desert sunset behind them. She rarely looked at it directly. When Ethan first mentioned the Lonier Shooting Club, she deflected. He brought it up casually one night, saying the range was hosting an open competition. She'd paused with a dish in her hands. "Just watch," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan didn't let it go. "You used to love it. You were the best," he reminded her, not knowing just how true that was. She nodded and changed the subject, but the thought lingered. Later, alone. She opened her laptop and found the club's website. It advertised elite lanes, premium gear, bourbon lounges, and competitive matches. The sign-up page had a box for observer and another for participant. Her cursor hovered, then clicked. She paid the $45 fee with the card she usually reserved for emergencies. The confirmation email arrived within seconds, followed by a PDF outlining the rules. She printed it and folded it into the envelope that sat on the fridge for 2 days. Ethan didn't ask again, But on Saturday morning, she laid it next to his cereal bowl. "I'm going," she said, already tying her shoes. He looked up, surprised, and smiled so wide she felt her chest tighten. She chose to rent the club's gear. Her own rifle had been sold long ago, along with everything else that didn't fit into their two-bedroom apartment when they left North Carolina. She hadn't fired a weapon since her final qualification test. In that life, she was Sergeant Carter Tactical Team Leader, 2 tours overseas, top of her sniper class at Fort Bragg. But that story ended with a folded flag, a job layoff, and a one-way drive west. She didn't talk about the military, not because she was ashamed, but because the memories were clean and quiet, and she wanted them to stay that way. Now, sitting in her car outside the range, Megan looked at the laminated number 12 that the clerk had handed her, and the map scrawled with unfamiliar checkpoints. She reached for the ring around her finger, a simple silver band engraved with coordinates no one would recognize. It had been a gift from her unit, a quiet reminder that, when the moment came, she had not hesitated. Her hands rested on the steering wheel for a long time before she stepped out. She wore jeans, a tucked-in button-up, and sneakers. No makeup, no fanfare. Just Megan, the woman no one was watching, the woman no one expected. The Lonier Shooting Club sat just outside the city limits, a sprawling estate of polished redwood walls and framed metals glowing under soft, recessed lights. Inside, voices bounced off the stone fireplace and leather armchairs in the members' lounge, where men in branded vests discussed ballistics over small batch bourbon. A sign above the pro shop read, "Tradition through Excellence," and below it, a glass case displayed vintage firearms alongside glossy club brochures. The air smelled faintly of gun oil and cologne, the atmosphere calibrated for wealth, experience, and legacy. Megan Carter walked through the front entrance holding nothing but her keys, a folded rules packet, and the laminated card that read Lane 12. She'd dressed simply fitted jeans, a tucked button-down shirt, and her son's old sneakers. Her hair was tied back in a low ponytail, clean but unspectacular. She passed men carrying custom aluminum cases and wearing shooting gloves with embroidered initials. Some gave her a glance and turned away. Others didn't look at all. At the registration table, she presented her form. The clerk gave a brief glance at her name, hesitated, then gestured toward a side table where range rifles were laid out. "Standard rentals fine." "Right," he asked, not waiting for her reply. The rifle she received had visible scuffs on the stock and a loose safety lever. She checked the chamber out of habit, nodded, and moved on. By the lockers, 2 men in matching vests were already watching her. One leaned in and muttered, "Here we go. Ladies' Day arrived early." The other laughed and added, "Bet she's here for her boyfriend." Megan pretended not to hear, walking past them toward the briefing area. They followed her with their eyes, noting the laminated card pinned to her back pocket. One of them, Ryan Ellis, 3-time club champion, rickled as he pulled out his phone and whispered to a friend nearby. Tom Trenton, the assistant range officer, called for all participants to gather. He read names in a clipped voice, ignoring Megan until she raised her hand on the second pass. "Oh, right," he said flatly, then continued without making eye contact. During the safety talk, Tom addressed the men directly, making references to military drills and hunting trips. "As y'all know," he said, "keep your cheek welds tight and your scopes zeroed. We ain't babysitting today." Megan raised her hand once, politely, to ask whether muzzle flags were required for rentals. Tom glanced at her, sighed audibly, and said, "Just try to follow what the others are doing." Several heads turned toward her with amusement. A low murmur spread across the group. Rick, the range manager, approached her just before lane assignments were finalized. His shoulders were broad, his sleeves rolled, and a faded "Don't tread on me" tattoo peeked out beneath the fabric. He glanced at her card, then back at her face, Lane 12, he said. Expression unreadable. She nodded. Figures. He muttered to a staffer nearby. Put the PR sign up on the busted platform. The other man, wearing a Lonier polo shirt and a military-style buzz cut, smirked. Make sure her target has training wheels. Her lane was on the far end, where the gravel sloped unevenly and the sun cut across the sightline. She set down her rifle and adjusted the station quietly while the others chatted and laughed in loose groups behind her. One man walking past said under his breath, $10. Says she doesn't fire a single round. Another added, 20. Says she cries before the first shot. Phones were already out. Megan unfolded the rules packet and read silently, blocking out the noise. A younger man named Kyle, wearing mirrored shades and a custom-fitted range vest, wandered over and leaned on the wall beside her. Hey, just so you know, he said casually, they start at the back target first and move forward in this format. It's a little weird. She looked at the diagram on her packet, which showed the opposite. He smirked and turned away. A few minutes later, she heard him laughing with two others, repeating her name. Soccer moms headed for the wrong marker. When the rounds began, Megan's form was immediately questioned. Tom approached mid-cycle and tapped her shoulder. You're dropping your elbow, he said loudly, so others could hear. Might want to tighten that grip before you lose control of the stock. She adjusted, saying nothing. 2 lanes over, a man fired with a canted scope and swung his muzzle during ceasefire. Tom didn't react. Ryan passed behind her during a break, pausing long enough to tilt his head and fake a thoughtful expression. Not bad. You ever shoot anything besides Tupperware? He laughed before she could reply, then wandered off as others rickled. As the morning continued, her name became a recurring punchline. One man mimed holding a rifle with oven mitts. Another mimicked a flinch every time she took a shot. Megan kept her focus forward, breathing evenly, ignoring the laughter that flared up with each passing moment. Someone behind her muttered, "Hope she brought cookies for after." Later, Club President Robert Hoffman strolled along the line, stopping behind her. He wore a jacket with embroidered gold thread and a Rolex that caught the light with each gesture. Megan Carter, he said, scanning her entry form, signed up for the expert bracket. She nodded. He raised his eyebrows. Bold. He murmured, loud enough to be heard. Then he began a slow, exaggerated assessment of her setup. He corrected a stance detail that hadn't changed all morning. Just looking out for club safety, he said, and moved on, without addressing the actual safety violation in lane 10. As she reset her position, she noticed a phone pointed directly at her. On its screen, a freeze frame of her awkward grip was now zoomed and captioned. The words, Pinterest Patriot, scrolled underneath as someone laughed behind her. She didn't turn around. By the time the lunch break arrived, her name was trending in the club's online group chat. Someone had screen-grabbed a close-up of her focusing down the scope and labeled it Target Dignity. The post already had 20 laughing emojis and a thread of comments debating whether she was a prop for a diversity push or just confused. Megan walked back to the clubhouse, her laminated card still clipped to her jeans, her steps quiet. No one offered her a seat, no one asked her name, and not one of them had yet seen her fire a single round from full form. The first round began under a sky bleached by Texas heat, the midday sun casting sharp angles across the lanes. Megan lay prone at lane 12, her elbows pressed into gravel that dug through the matting beneath her. The Remington 700 felt heavier today, its stock slightly off balance. A range officer paced behind her with a clipboard, pausing after each shot to jot something down. After her third round, he cleared his throat and called out, "Shooter 12, cheek weld inconsistent. Make the adjustment." She complied silently. 2 lanes over, a man fired with his shoulder too far back, causing visible recoil jump. No correction came. By the sixth shot, the pattern was obvious. Every minor variation in Megan's form became a public lesson in what not to do. Onlookers started whispering louder, laughing under their breath. A cluster of off-duty members gathered behind her lane, sipping coffee and snapping photos. One zoomed in on her form and posted it to the club's internal chat with the caption, "Home-style grip. Taste the recoil." Another followed with, "Target self-respect," tagging it with a winking emoji. Within minutes, screenshots had hit public shooting forums. Someone added Pinterest Patriot over a cropped image of her bracing for recoil. The live stream, projected on a monitor back in the clubhouse and mirrored on tablets throughout the grounds, showed her grouping in real time. Viewers in chat commented freely, "Sweetheart's first time at a big boy range. Can we get her a Hello Kitty spotting scope? Is she lining up for PTA elections, or what?" The reactions gained traction quickly. A gif of her adjusting her stock with a shaky hand began circulating with the tagline, "When your yoga instructor shows up armed." In the middle of a break between heats, Megan checked her phone. Ethan's text lit up the screen. "Mom, some kids at school saw a video of you. They're being mean. Are you okay?" Her breath caught. For a moment she couldn't move. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but no reply came. She locked the phone, slipping it into the front pocket of her jeans without a word. She looked out at the sunlit lanes again, its glare suddenly brighter than before. The leaderboard mounted near the clubhouse doors flickered as judges input scores. Megan's name was at the bottom, highlighted in red. Carter, R. Dead last. She watched the name above hers. Justin Hill. A teenager with visibly scattered groupings remain untouched by scrutiny. One of the spectators nearby commented, "It's fair. She's got beginner energy." Another laughed. "More like retirement home energy." The second round saw an even thicker crowd around her station. Now men leaned against the dividers with drinks in hand, treating her lane like a theater box. Her every movement was recorded, her reload, her breathing, the tight line of her jaw. Someone near the score desk whispered, "Is she actually trying to win or just padding our stats?" A burst of laughter followed. Later, while refilling her water bottle, Megan stepped quietly into the women's bathroom behind the clubhouse. She moved toward the last stall but paused when she heard voices bouncing off the tile. Two women stood at the mirror, one applying lipstick with the care of someone preparing for a magazine cover. "I'd be mortified if I looked like that," one said. "Can't believe she's still going. It's like watching someone drown in slow motion." The other rickled, dabbing powder beneath her eyes. "My boyfriend showed me her video last night, called it Sniper School for Scrapbookers." Their laughter rang out, hard and glossy. Megan slipped into the last stall, shutting the door quietly. She sat on the closed toilet seat and stared at her boots. The stall was narrow, lit by a flickering overhead bulb. Graffiti scratched into the metal door spelled out someone's forgotten initials. She took a breath, then another, grounding herself in the familiar. Close quarters. Silence. Focus. She stayed until the voices faded. On her way out, she passed a side office with the door slightly ajar. Inside, two staff members from the event committee sat at a small desk, folding scoring sheets and chatting over paperwork. One man, flipping through a rulebook, said, "Maybe next year we introduce a novice tier. Make it easier for the ladies. Give them closer targets or wider rings." The other laughed, tapping his pen. "Or let them use stabilizers. You know, like training wheels for optics." Neither saw her walking past. Neither lowered their voices. Megan stopped outside, just beyond the range of their air-conditioned bubble. The gravel crunched under her sneakers as she reached for her water bottle. She didn't drink. She stood there for a long moment, looking down at the scorecard in her hand. The first round 3 out of 10 marked with slashes. The second 5, although her target told a different story. Her groupings were tight. 2 of her shots kissed the inner ring, but they'd been logged as outer misses. She didn't bother asking for a review. She walked the path back to lane 12, past spectators who no longer looked at her with curiosity but with bored amusement. She heard her name mentioned casually in a conversation about club mascots. Another man remarked that he felt bad, like watching someone try to dance in a hurricane. A woman nearby added, "She signed up for this. If you want to play elite, you take the hits." When Megan sat again, the mat beneath her was slightly kicked out of place. Footprints marked the edge of her lane. She adjusted the rifle, aligning her sights one more time. She didn't speak. She didn't ask for fairness. Her jaw clenched. Her breath slowed. She didn't notice the wind. Didn't see the phone raised behind her. All she saw was the line, the scope, and the stillness ahead. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound of something preparing to land. Megan sat alone on the bench near lane 12, elbows on her knees, the rifle resting in her lap. The club's final round announcement echoed faintly from the speaker near the judge's table, but she didn't lift her head. Her opponent's name was called Justin Hill, 19, lean, flushed with nervous energy, his branded vest too stiff to look lived in. He gave her a quick glance as he passed, then a polite nod that barely masked the relief in his expression. Everyone in the crowd expected a mercy match. One last spectacle before her quiet dismissal. The spectators were already gathering again, laughing as they jostled for position behind the ropes. Phones were up before anyone had even stepped onto the range. Someone joked about placing bets. Another pointed to Justin and called him Gravedigger, earning a chorus of rickles. Behind them, a club sponsor sipped coffee from a ceramic mug and muttered that the old woman was about to fold. Megan closed her eyes. Let the voices fall away. Let the heat roll across her shoulders. Let the ambient sound reduce to nothing. Slowly, she reached for the ring on her finger, the silver band worn smooth by time and dust. She turned it once, then again. Her thumb brushed the ridge of its engraved edge, where coordinates were inscribed beneath the shine. She remembered the sand, the wind that never stopped, the rasp of grit against her cheek as she lay belly down on a hillside outside Kandahar. Her rifle was heavier then, the silence more complete. She could still hear Corporal Davis counting out the seconds beside her. His voice was calm even as the team below took fire. Wait. Wait. Wind 3 knots from the east. Hold. She'd adjusted, exhaled, fired once, then again, and again. 3 bodies fell. 18 men lived. She opened her eyes slowly, returning to the present. The club around her faded back into view, distant and pale. The polished wood, the brass plaques, the heat-stained flags fluttering on the poles. None of it mattered. The noise, the eyes, the bet's background static. Megan stood, lifted her rifle, and walked to the firing line. Justin Hill adjusted his scope, making a show of checking elevation and windage. He chatted with someone over his shoulder, cracked his knuckles, laughed. He looked her way once, his grin wide and relaxed, and then turned back to his lane. Megan knelt, checked her chamber, slid her bolt. No sound rushed, no breath wasted. She placed her elbows, her feet, her cheek. Slowly, without urgency, she lowered herself to the ground. The crowd's laughter softened. Something in her posture had changed. Her shoulders no longer hunched under scrutiny. Her hands no longer fumbled to adjust. She moved with the ease of someone returning home. Her cheek weld was perfect, her scope alignment precise. A judge watching from the corner blinked, suddenly aware that the woman they had mocked all day had just disappeared, and something else had taken her place. A breeze drifted across the lanes, soft but steady. Megan noted the pattern on the grass to her left. She adjusted one click right, exhaled fully, and let the weight of the rifle become part of her shoulder. No one spoke to her now. The man who'd earlier bet she would cry had fallen silent. His phone paused mid-recording. One judge leaned closer to the monitor. Another raised binoculars. Megan's breathing slowed. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. To them, it was the final match of a novelty entry. To her, it was wind, distance, metal, silence. The same tools she'd used to save lives in a world that never saw her face. The match was about to begin, but she had already arrived. The shot cracked through the range, clean and sharp, slicing the air with finality. The recoil settled into Megan's shoulder like a heartbeat, and the rifle barely moved. Her breathing did not change. Through the scope, the target sat unshaken, its white center now punctured by a single black mark dead center. First bullseye. She didn't pause. She chambered the next round with the same deliberate precision she had used in hundreds of live fire exercises, and let her finger fall gently back into position. Her breath settled again. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. The second shot followed. Another clean break. Another dead center. Someone near the viewing tent let out a quiet exhale. At lane 8, a shooter stopped mid-reset, head turning toward the sound. The murmurs started small, confusion shifting into curiosity. A few competitors lowered their rifles, craning their necks to glimpse what was unfolding on lane 12. Megan's third round cut through the air, 3 perfect shots. The tightness of her group stunned even those unfamiliar with scoring. The bullseyes weren't merely clustered, they were kissing each other. Overlapping. A wave of silence spread outward like a ripple. Laughter halted. Conversations died in half-formed words. Phones rose again, but not to mock. Not this time. The lens angles changed from zooms on posture and mishandling to trembling focus on the target monitor. Shot 4 punched through the cluster, leaving the center intact but tearing into its edges. The whole began to fray. No longer a collection of hits, but a single dark wound. In the viewing box, a judge stopped typing. Another leaned closer to the screen, blinking in disbelief. Across the range, the club president stood without realizing it. His eyes locked on the data feed. Robert Hoffman's mouth opened slightly, the cigar between his fingers forgotten. Megan did not look up. Her jaw remained slack, her eyes steady. The 5th shot landed, then the 6th. No wind adjustment, no posture change. Each cycle flowed into the next like breath. She existed inside the stillness now, her body gone quiet except for the pulse in her fingers and the whisper of the bolt sliding forward. Even the birds that had chirped through the morning quieted. The breeze had slowed. All she saw was the circle at the end of her scope, the alignment of rings, the rhythm she had carried from war zones into civilian silence. Shot 7 kissed the others, expanding the center but never straying. Shot 8 followed before anyone could breathe. By then, the range had stopped entirely. Every competitor had abandoned their lane. Some held phones, others simply stared. Club members who had laughed at her in the lounge now stood behind the yellow safety rope with their hands pressed against their chests. The 9th shot landed, splitting the edge of the hole further. The monitor screen flickered from white to shadow as the blackened core deepened. Behind her, no one spoke. No one moved. Every judge had frozen, tablets at their sides, styluses untouched. And then came the 10th. The trigger pull was almost imperceptible, the recoil minimal. The sound, once ignored, now felt like the only thing in the world. The shot cut through the hot afternoon, and on the screen, the final round passed directly through the first, a perfect dead center pass through. No deviation, no margin. The 10-shot sequence ended with a single ragged hole in the very heart of the target. Silence followed. Complete. Not one phone dinged. Not one breath broke the moment. The judge's table remained still. The audience stared as if they'd witnessed something they didn't know how to name. A man near the back took a step forward, then stopped. His face had gone pale. Megan lowered her rifle slowly. Her arms relaxed, the muscles in her shoulders uncoiled. She sat up, but did not turn. Her body language hadn't changed from the first round to the last. The only difference now was the weight in the air behind her, dozens of men and women stunned into reverence. Someone exhaled a word into the hush. "That's not possible," they whispered. Another man stepped forward. His name tag read Wade Thompson, the instructor who had earlier snatched the rifle from her hands. He stared at her, lips parted, then down at her hand, where the silver ring caught a glint of sunlight as she adjusted her grip. Recognition struck. His face changed, his eyes narrowing, his skin paling under the brim of his cap. He took another step forward, his voice barely audible. "You're Carter," he said. Not a question. Megan Carter. The name fell like a stone. People turned. Heads snapped back to her. She remained still. Wade looked again at the ring. "3rd Battalion. Ghost Recon," he said. "You're the one from Kandahar." More silence. Then another name surfaced, whispered from somewhere behind the viewing deck. "The Angel of Kandahar." Gasps followed. Someone dropped a phone. The scoreboard still blinked her final score 100 out of 100. No notes, no flags, no red marks. The 10-shot sequence flashing in replay. A judge stumbled backward, muttering that he had never seen a pass through that clean in 20 years. Another picked up a range report and held it in disbelief. Robert Hoffman was frozen in place. His watch gleamed under the sun, but his face had drained of color. He looked at her as though he were seeing her for the first time, slowly, as if remembering protocol. He raised his hand to clap, then stopped, unsure of the gesture's meaning anymore. Megan stood, lifted the rifle, and locked the bolt. She said nothing. She did not smile. She did not correct anyone. She did not bow or boast or nod. She only stepped away from the line, her pace calm, her posture unchanged, the silver ring glinting again as she handed the weapon back to the stunned clerk at the equipment table. No one laughed. No one spoke. No one followed. In her stillness, in the perfect circle on the monitor, in the quiet gasps trailing her steps, Megan Carter had already said everything. By the time Megan returned to the clubhouse, the leaderboard had been cleared and reloaded. Her name now sat at the top, adjusted not just for her final round, but retroactively corrected for rounds 1 and 2. Someone had dug out her targets and reviewed them with a magnifier, tracing the edges of each shot that had been unfairly marked down. Now her total score flashed clean and full. Perfect. Inside. The air had changed. Conversations quieted as she passed. The same men who had earlier smirked at her jeans and stance now stepped aside. One of the range judges sat at a desk thumbing through a tablet, his face tight with concentration. He glanced up as she approached, then stood quickly. We reviewed everything," he said. "Turns out your scoring was well. There were errors." He hesitated. "Your sniper school record came up. Fort Bragg, top percentile. There's a file here with commendations and other things." Robert Hoffman was already waiting by the long window, arms crossed, face unreadable. When she approached, he cleared his throat and extended a folder. "We'd like to offer you a lifetime membership," he said. "Free access, full privileges. Also, an opening for an instructor just came up. We'd be honored." Megan accepted the folder, then gently slid it into her jacket pocket. "I appreciate it," she said quietly, "but I have other priorities." She didn't elaborate. Instead, she reached into the folder and removed a single page. "But I do have a proposal. There are kids who never get access to training or safety programs. I'd like to see Loniar fund a youth education series, open to everyone, not just sons of members." Rick, standing nearby, jumped in before Hoffman could reply. "Done," he said quickly. "We'll launch it by fall." He didn't meet her eyes. He didn't need to. A few minutes later, near the gear station, Ryan Miller lingered awkwardly with his rifle disassembled on the bench. He glanced at her, cleared his throat, and said nothing. Megan paused, then gestured lightly at his trigger grip. "You're anticipating recoil," she said. "That's why you keep drifting low left." Ryan blinked, looked down at his hand, and nodded. "I've been trying to fix that for months," he admitted. "Appreciate it." She said nothing else, just offered the comment and walked away, leaving him watching her retreat, stunned into stillness. Outside, the air had softened. Evening sun caught the gold edging of the club's flag as it shifted in the wind. Megan moved toward the parking lot, past the crowds that had thinned into hushed knots. At the edge of the lot, Ethan stood waiting near the Civic. He had come with Luca's mom, who now sat quietly in the driver's seat watching from a distance. Ethan's eyes were wide, but not surprised. He held up his phone, its screen still open to the stream. "You didn't tell me," he said, voice low. Megan smiled, reaching out to straighten his collar. "I didn't need to," she said. He stared at her a moment longer, then grinned, pride overtaking shock. Together, they turned toward the car, the silver ring on her hand catching one final glint of sunlight as she reached for the door. The trophy from Lane 12 remained untouched, forgotten on the table inside. She hadn't come to collect it. Megan Carter did not ask for recognition. She did not need to prove herself to the world. Yet when pushed to the edge of humiliation, she responded not with words or defiance, but with clarity, skill, and quiet strength. Her story is not about revenge. It is about knowing who you are when others try to define you, about standing still when others try to erase you. She walked into a place that had already made up its mind about her, and left having changed it without ever raising her voice. For anyone who has felt invisible, dismissed, or out of place, this story is for you. Let it remind you that your worth is not measured by the noise you make, but by the truth you carry. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments, and follow for more stories where quiet power speaks loudest.